My mother was standing under the white crystal chandeliers of the Halstead House ballroom, one manicured hand pressed flat against a stack of glossy invoices, the other pointing straight at my chest while the room glowed in that sterile, expensive kind of hotel light that makes silverware look sharper than it is. The floral wall behind her smelled like garden roses and money. My sister Vanessa stood 2 steps to her left in a satin robe the color of champagne, one hand clamped around a flute she wasn't drinking from, her jaw tight enough to show in the muscles near her ears. My father, Thomas Carter, had his thumbs hooked into the pockets of his navy blazer as if he were about to moderate a board meeting instead of a public execution. And across the sample tables covered in ivory linen, wedding planner Celeste Moreno had gone perfectly still, her tablet hovering in both hands. "Tell them," my mother snapped. "Tell them why you're suddenly refusing to pay for your own sister's wedding." A few heads turned near the ballroom doors. 2 servers in black vests froze with trays of water glasses. Derek Hall, Vanessa's fiancé, looked from my face to the invoice stack like a man watching a bridge crack under him. "My name is Evelyn Marie Carter. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how my parents forged my name onto my sister's $38,000 wedding bill, and how I made sure the cost of lying to me became the most expensive lesson of their lives." For a second, nobody breathed. Then Vanessa laughed, short and brittle, and lifted her chin in that practiced way she'd used since high school whenever she wanted to look wounded and superior at the same time. "Please don't do this here," she said. But of course she wanted it here. In front of the hotel staff. In front of Derek. In front of anyone who could carry the story back to the valet stand and the bridal suite and the rest of the family waiting upstairs with makeup brushes and mimosas. "You promised." "Mom said you promised." "I never promised that," I said. My father shifted his weight onto one foot and gave me the look he used whenever he wanted to imply disappointment without raising his voice. It had worked on church committees, bank managers, contractors, teachers, and most of the people who had ever needed anything from him. "Evelyn," he said, low and measured, "this isn't the time to posture." There was a polished mahogany tasting table between us, still scattered with linen swatches, menu cards, and a silver cake knife no one had put away. My mother slid the top page across it with 2 fingers. "Your signature is right there." I didn't reach for it. Vanessa set her glass down too hard. The stem clicked against the tabletop. "I knew you resented this wedding," she said. "I knew you hated that people were finally paying attention to someone else." The lie was almost elegant in its audacity. It arrived fully dressed. No hesitation. No blush. Just that soft, injured voice she used on men and waiters and older women at bridal salons. Celeste glanced at me, then at the papers, and then very carefully back at her tablet. Derek rubbed the back of his neck and frowned. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, one of those men who always looked slightly uncomfortable in formal wear, and at that moment he looked less like an angry fiancé than a confused witness. My mother leaned forward. Her diamond bracelet clicked against the invoice packet. "The final balance is due today. You put your name on the guarantee. If you think you can humiliate this family and walk away." "Humiliate this family," Vanessa repeated, almost whispering it, as if the phrase itself were fragile. Then louder, "On my wedding weekend." There it was, the audience line. The part that was supposed to force me into a corner where the only socially acceptable move was surrender. I let my eyes travel over the room instead, over the mirrored columns, over the pale silk runners arranged for the reception preview, over the gold Chiavari chairs stacked by the stage like witnesses waiting to be seated. One of the servers quietly backed through the side door. Good. Let them have fewer strangers to perform for. "Evelyn," my father said again, and there was steel in it now. "Enough." He always spoke more softly when he wanted the blow to land harder. My mother preferred spectacle. My father preferred compression. He could make a room feel smaller with a single word. Vanessa folded her arms. "Just say it. Say you changed your mind because you can't stand not being the center of things." I looked at her face then, really looked at it. The contouring was flawless. Her false lashes trembled once when she blinked. She had spent the last 11 months building a wedding that looked less like a marriage and more like a magazine spread curated for people she barely liked. Ice sculpture, imported peonies in October, live string quartet, hand-painted menu cards, custom lounge installation, A 7-tier cake she'd once described to me as architectural. $38,000 in final vendor obligations alone, and that was before honeymoon transfers and the rehearsal dinner bar package. 3 months earlier, if you'd asked me what my family valued most, I would have said appearances. 3 days earlier, I would have added leverage. My mother tapped the signature again. Do not stand there and pretend this isn't yours. What email did you use? I asked. She blinked. That's not the issue, my father said. It is for me, I said calmly. What email did you use when you sent this contract to the hotel? Vanessa let out an incredulous sound. Oh my God, are you serious right now? Derek's head turned. Small thing. But I saw it. People only turn like that when the conversation stops, making the kind of sense they were told it made. My mother straightened. You're deflecting. No, I said. I'm narrowing. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ballroom air system pushing cold air through hidden vents overhead. Somewhere down the corridor, a housekeeping cart rattled over tile. Vanessa stepped toward me, satin hem whispering against the floor. If you wanted to ruin this weekend, congratulations. But don't stand there acting superior. We have a contract. I finally picked up the top page. The paper was thick, hotel grade, cream stock with a raised watermark in the bottom corner. My forged signature curved across the guarantee line in dark blue ink. It looked close enough to fool a stranger, maybe even a vendor in a hurry, but not me, not after what had happened in January. I set the page back down exactly where I found it. Then I looked at Celeste. Before anyone says another word, I said evenly, I'd like the original contract. The shift in the room was almost invisible, but it was there. My mother's shoulders locked. My father's jaw tightened. Vanessa's fingers loosened from the knot they'd made in the satin belt at her waist. And that was how Act 1 of their little ambush ended. Not with me crying. Not with me arguing. Not with me paying. With me asking for the one thing they had hoped nobody would ever think to request. Celeste swallowed. The original sign packet is in accounts, she said carefully. But I can pull the digital submission history from the vendor portal. You don't need to do that, my mother said too quickly. I turned to her. Why not? Because we're family, she snapped. This should be handled privately. The irony landed so cleanly it almost made me smile. Family. That word had been the lock they used on every door. Family pays. Family doesn't embarrass each other. Family keeps quiet. Family understands. Family forgives. In my parents' house, that word never meant protection. It meant obligation with no receipt. Derek stepped closer to Vanessa. Not touching her, just near enough for the distance to register. Babe, he said, staring at the papers. Why would there be a different email? Vanessa's head whipped toward him. Because hotels use multiple contacts all the time. Celeste looked down at her tablet again. We do, she said. But guarantor documents come through a verified billing contact. Usually the guarantor directly. Usually, my father repeated, and I could hear the warning threaded under it. I watched the planner's throat move as she swallowed again. Celeste had a copper-colored bob cut sharp at the jawline, and she always wore narrow gold hoops that caught the light when she turned her head. The first time I met her, she seemed like someone who had learned to smile with exactly as much warmth as a difficult client deserved, and not a degree more. Now she looked like a woman standing on a fault line. Celeste, I said, please pull it. My mother laughed once. You think you can order people around because you work in compliance for a software company. No, I said. I think I can ask for records when my name appears on a financial guarantee I never signed. Derek looked at me then, really looked. You're saying you didn't sign anything. I'm saying, I replied evenly, that if someone used my name on a $38,000 obligation without my consent, we're past wedding stress and well into fraud. Vanessa recoiled like I had slapped her. Fraud? Are you insane? No, I said. Just thorough. My father took one slow step toward the table and flattened his palm on the invoices. The gold wedding band he'd worn for 36 years flashed under the ballroom lights. Evelyn, enough legal language. Your sister is getting married in less than 24 hours. And someone forged my name. You're being dramatic, my mother said. That would have stung once. When I was 22, maybe even 28. Back when my instinct was still to defend my intentions instead of observing their strategy. But by 32, After a decade spent untangling vendor misconduct, procurement irregularities, and corporate people who smiled while moving numbers into places they never belonged, I had learned the oldest trick in the room. The first person to tell you not to use precise language is usually the one most threatened by facts. Vanessa dragged both hands through her hair, careful not to disturb the curls. So what, Evelyn? What are you trying to do? Delay the payment so the venue cancels us. I held her gaze. What I'm trying to do is understand why your billing contact email is a Carter Consulting Desk at Proton Mail. The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost theatrical. Derek noticed. So did Celeste. I what? Vanessa stammered. My mother's mouth opened. Closed. My father's hand left the invoices. There are moments when a room changes owners. You can feel it before anyone says a word. It doesn't happen because somebody shouts louder. It happens because truth enters wearing work shoes instead of costume jewelry. Celeste's eyes lifted slowly from the tablet to my mother's face. That is the billing contact on file, she said. It was created in February. Derek took a step back from Vanessa. Why would there be a fake email with Evelyn's name on it? Vanessa swung toward my mother. Mom! My mother's voice came out higher than usual. It's not fake. It was just for planning. For planning, I repeated. For convenience, my father said, inserting himself with the reflex of a man who had spent his whole life believing he could still rescue bad situations by sounding reasonable enough. I nodded once. Then I'm sure the portal logs will clear everything up. Vanessa's breathing had changed. Quick! Shallow upper chest. She looked at the ballroom doors, then at Derek, then at me. You are unbelievable, she whispered. You waited until now. No, I said softly. You waited until now. That landed. I saw it in her shoulders. Because this was the truth they didn't know yet. I had not discovered the forgery that morning. I had discovered the first trace of it 10 weeks earlier, on a gray Tuesday in February, when a hotel confirmation email meant for E. Carter had been misrouted to my actual inbox by a tired accounts coordinator who assumed the fake address belonged to me. The subject line had read Final Guarantor Acknowledgement. I'd opened it between meetings, expecting spam. What I found instead was my name attached to a bridal contract addendum, my phone number missing, my company title inserted beneath my signature line, and a final balance schedule that climbed like a bad joke. I hadn't called my mother. I hadn't called Vanessa. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't even replied. I took screenshots, downloaded the PDF, preserved the headers, forwarded everything to a private folder. And by 5:30 that evening, I had retained an attorney. My mother reached for the invoice packet again, but her fingers missed the top page and dragged crookedly over the stack. We are not doing this today. Actually, I said, today is perfect. Derek looked between all of us. Vanessa, did you tell me her parents were covering florals and that you two had bonuses coming in for the rest? Vanessa's eyes widened. Derek, not now. When, I asked quietly, was a better time to ask why my salary verification was attached to your ballroom upgrade request. The silence hit the room like a dropped pane of glass. Celeste lifted her head. Salary verification? My father spoke over her. This conversation is over. No, I said. It's just beginning. I took my phone from my coat pocket and unlocked it with my thumb. The screen lit my hand in cool white. I tapped once, then turned it towards Celeste first, not my family. February 13th, 9:14 a.m. This is the misrouted email your accounts office sent me by mistake. Subject line matches the document number on that invoice packet. Attachment 1 is the forged guarantor page. Attachment 2 is a PDF titled Evelyn_Carter_income_verification_final. I never created that file. I never approved that file. And I never consented to my compensation being used to secure this event. Celeste stared at the screen, then at the papers, then back at the screen. Her face didn't move, but her grip on the tablet tightened hard enough for her knuckles to blanch. Vanessa made a tiny sound in the back of her throat. Derek looked at her with something colder than confusion now. My mother recovered first, which didn't surprise me. She had always been quickest when the lie needed fresh paint. That doesn't prove anything, she said. Families share information all the time. Not with forged signatures, I replied. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm documenting it. Then I scrolled. This, I continued, is the metadata report for the signed guarantor PDF. It was generated on a MacBook registered to Thomas Carter Real Estate Holdings. 3 minutes later, it was uploaded through the vendor portal from an IP address assigned to your house in Naperville. My father went still. Vanessa looked at him slowly. Dad! He didn't answer. I scrolled again. And this, I said, is the comparison between my real signature and the one on that page. Same base sample. Same pen pressure pattern. Same copy tail stroke on the Y. Except the forged version reproduces a hesitation mark from a scanned holiday card I sent Grandma Joan in 2022. Which means whoever made it traced from an image, not a live signature. Derek took another step back. His dress shoes scraped lightly against the ballroom floor. My mother's lips parted. You hired a handwriting expert. I hired a forensic document examiner. Vanessa's face had gone the color of paper left in the sun too long. You had someone analyze my wedding contract. No, I said. I had someone analyze the crime attached to it. That was the line where the room tipped. My father slammed one hand against the mahogany table. The cake knife jumped. Do not use that word. Which one? I asked. Wedding or crime? You arrogant. Thomas, Celeste said, and it was the first time she had addressed him by name instead of Mr. Carter. If there's a discrepancy in guarantor authorization, we have to pause all billing activity immediately. My mother rounded on her. You can't pause this. We have guests arriving. Celeste met her gaze. If the guarantee is disputed, I can. Vanessa grabbed Derek's sleeve. Say something. He looked at her hand on his jacket, then at her face. Did you know? She didn't answer quickly enough. That was revelation number 3, though not the last. Sometimes guilt shows up less in what people say than in how long they take to say it. I took a slow sip from the water glass one of the servers had abandoned. The water was cold enough to sting my teeth. Across from me, my mother had begun breathing through her mouth. Vanessa's lower lip trembled once before she bit it flat. My father stared at my phone as if the right expression could make data reverse itself. Actually, I said, setting the glass down with deliberate care, you weren't trapping me into paying a family expense. You were committing financial fraud, identity misuse, and attempted coercion in a hospitality contract. No one interrupted me. That was new. Celeste drew in a breath. I'm contacting hotel counsel and freezing the account pending verification. You do that, I said. My mother pointed at me again, but there was no force in it now. Only shake. If you bring lawyers into this, Evelyn, you will destroy your sister's wedding. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. No, I said. You did that when you signed my name. Then I looked at Derek. If I were you, I said calmly, I'd ask to see every invoice. He stared at me like a man who had just realized the floor plan in his head did not match the building he was standing in. I turned for the door. Behind me, Vanessa said my name in a voice I had never heard from her before, stripped, raw, and small and frightened. I did not turn around. At the ballroom threshold, with the light from the hotel corridor cutting in a pale strip across the carpet, I stopped just long enough to say the one thing I had come there to say in person. From this point on, I said, without looking back, send everything to my attorney. I walked out past the mirrored wall panels, past the brass luggage carts, past a little cluster of hydrangeas set on a marble console table in the foyer. My pulse was steady by then. My hands were warm again. They thought they had cornered me with a bill. They had no idea they had built me a case. The next few days moved with the eerie, airless speed of a train you can feel accelerating before you hear it. Hotel counsel froze the Halstead House account by noon. By 3, my attorney had sent preservation notices to the venue, the florist, the rental company, and the event planning firm. By 6, my mother had called me 19 times. My father had left 2 voicemails, each drier and more furious than the last. Vanessa sent 11 texts in under an hour, shifting from denial to accusation to the kind of sentimental manipulation people only use when the practical options are collapsing. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom says there was a misunderstanding. If you cared about this family at all, you'd handle it privately. Derek is asking questions. Please just call me. I miss who you used to be. That last one almost made me laugh. People always miss the version of you that was easiest to use. I never answered. I archived everything. Instead, I sat in the conference room at Sloan and Hart on Wabash Avenue under warm recessed lighting, with a leather folio open in front of me and attorney Miriam Sloan across the walnut table. Miriam was 51, silver at the temples, immaculately tailored, and so exact with language it felt surgical. She had the kind of stillness that makes other people confess more than they intend to. To her right sat Jordan Pike, a private investigator with a flattened military haircut, square glasses, and the patient posture of someone who had spent years waiting for liars to forget what version they were currently telling. Miriam slid a document across to me. "We've confirmed the email account was created from a recovery number ending in 4421, she said. "My mother's cell," I replied. Jordan nodded. "We also subpoenaed login location records through Hotel Council. All uploads came from one of 3 IP addresses. 2 mapped to your parents' home network. The 3rd maps to Thomas Carter Real Estate." I looked down at the page. Dates, timestamps, authentication events, upload records, file names. It read like weather data for a storm that had taken place inside my family's dining room. Miriam folded her hands. "The question is not whether they did it. The question is how hard you want to hit them." Outside the conference room, Chicago rain stitched silver lines down the windows. The city looked cold and metallic, all glass and slate. I thought about Vanessa at 16, stealing my black wool coat and stretching the sleeves because she liked how expensive it looked. I thought about my mother opening my mail by accident for years. I thought about my father telling me, after my first promotion, that it was nice I earned well enough to finally contribute meaningfully to the family. Not because they needed help, because control dressed itself most convincingly as gratitude in that house. "I want the truth documented," I said. "I want my name cleared with every vendor. I want every account corrected, and I want consequences that can survive denial." Miriam's mouth curved slightly. "Good answer." Jordan opened a second file. "There's more." That was when Revelation 4 arrived. On March 12th, Vanessa had approved a round of upgrades that increased total wedding exposure by nearly $11,000. Imported peonies, custom draping, premium liquor package, extended photography coverage, a late-night dessert cart with monogram sugarwork, all charged after the forged guarantee had already been submitted. And on March 18th, Linda Carter had emailed Celeste Moreno a message that read, "Evelyn signed off. She can afford it. Don't include her on every little change or she'll nitpick." I read that twice, not because it surprised me, because seeing your own exploitation summarized in one clean sentence can feel like finding out a bruise has fingerprints in it. Miriam watched me over steepled fingers. "There's a reason I wanted you here before we scheduled formal demand. Celeste Moreno contacted us independently this morning." I looked up. "She did." She forwarded a full email archive, including a voice memo. Jordan slid his phone across the table and pressed play. My mother's voice filled the conference room, tinny but unmistakable. "Celeste, I don't know why you're making this difficult. Evelyn already agreed. If the date on the signature page needs to match the addendum, then fix it. Nobody is auditing a wedding packet." A pause. "Celeste, tight and professional. I can't alter a signed financial document." Then my mother again, sharp as broken porcelain. "Then paste the signature and resend it. This is not complicated." I closed my eyes for 1 second. That was all. When I opened them, Miriam was watching for my reaction. I gave her none. "Why did Celeste switch sides?" I asked. Jordan answered, "Because your mother told the hotel that any irregularities were the planner's error. Celeste realized she was being set up as the fall person. She saved everything." I leaned back slowly. There it was, the long crack in the whole scheme. My family had mistaken professional courtesy for pliability. They thought service workers existed to absorb messes quietly. They thought vendors feared wealthy clients more than records. They thought everybody had a price, and if they didn't, they had a pressure point. They were wrong. "Schedule the meeting," I said. Miriam nodded. "Boardroom mediation first. Criminal referral language if they refuse." "And Derek?" Jordan glanced at his notes. "He asked for copies of all venue invoices this morning. He hasn't moved out of the penthouse suite yet, but he spent last night in a separate room." I let that settle over the table. Derek was not my ally. Not yet. But men like Derek Hall, men who have been raised to think financial order meant moral order, do not handle concealed debt well. And he had just learned that his future in-laws had built an event budget on a fake guarantor. "What about Vanessa?" I asked. Miriam slid a printout toward me. A bank pre-approval letter. "There's no bonus coming," she said. "Your sister was denied a credit line increase 2 months ago. That appears to be when the urgency escalated." Of course it was. Suddenly every call from my mother made sense. Every oddly specific question about my electronic signature settings. Every request for just a copy of that HR income letter because she wanted to compare salaries for an insurance application. Every casual remark about how family should help each other during milestone years. They hadn't chosen me because they trusted me. They had chosen me because I was solvent, single, organized, and accustomed to carrying more than my share. I thought about the document I had deliberately sent my mother in January when she asked for a sample signature for what she claimed was a family club roster. I had known something was off even then. So I sent a decoy authorization page, same signature style, but with a tiny embedded tracking watermark in the PDF layer and a shortened middle name formatting I never used on legal documents. Marie without the second initial. Subtle. Harmless to anyone not looking. Permanent to anyone performing document comparison. I had made sure she'd find exactly what I wanted her to find. Not because I fully knew the shape of the trap yet, but because experience had taught me that when people start requesting pieces of your identity in advance, they are rarely planning a surprise party. The boardroom at Sloan and Hart had floor-to-ceiling windows, dark walnut paneling, brushed steel fixtures, and a long conference table polished so smooth it reflected the carafe of water at its center like black glass. Authority has a texture in places like that. Leather chairs that sigh when you sit. Frosted office doors that close softly enough to make people overestimate how private they are. The faint scent of paper, coffee, and expensive restraint. They arrived 12 minutes late. My father came in first, but the man from the ballroom was gone. He looked smaller somehow, the confidence drained out of his posture so that the shoulders of his charcoal suit seemed to hang on him instead of belonging there. My mother entered beside him in cream wool and pearl earrings, chin lifted too high, lips drawn tight in a lipstick smile that fooled no one. Vanessa followed last, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses she removed only when she sat down. Her eyes were swollen. Derek walked in separately 2 minutes later and chose the chair at the far end rather than the one beside her. That detail said more than anything else in the room. Miriam sat to my right. Jordan stood near the credenza with 2 banker's boxes and a closed laptop. Celeste Moreno was already there, seated quietly against the wall in a navy sheath dress, hands folded over a legal pad. When my mother saw her, her expression flickered for half a second. Good. My father spotted me and tried on dignity, like a tie he no longer trusted. Evelyn! Dad! My mother didn't sit immediately. "This is obscene," she said, dragging her own family into a law office over a clerical issue. Miriam spoke before I could. "Mrs. Carter, if you continue to characterize forged guarantor documents as clerical issues, I can have a court reporter join us, and we can make that your official position." My mother sat. There are few sounds more satisfying than a bully recognizing a superior predator. Jordan opened the first banker's box and began placing labeled folders along the table. Hotel portal logs, email archive, IP match report, forensic signature analysis, billing timeline, call transcripts. Each one laid down with methodical precision. No theatrics, no flourish. Just wait. Miriam folded her reading glasses and set them atop a yellow legal pad. "We are here," she said, "to address fraudulent use of Evelyn Carter's identity in connection with the Halstead House wedding contract, associated vendor obligations, and subsequent coercive conduct." Vanessa made a strangled sound. "Coercive conduct?" She embarrassed me in front of my planner and my fiancé. Miriam didn't look at her. "Noted." Then she opened the first folder. "January 19th, she said, sliding a printout toward the center of the table. Linda Carter requested a signed family roster authorization from Evelyn Carter. January 19th, 3:42 p.m. Evelyn transmitted a PDF containing a signature sample. On February 3rd, that PDF was opened on a MacBook registered to Thomas Carter Real Estate Holdings. On February 3rd, 10:11 a.m., A new account was created with the email address at Carter Consulting Desk at Proton Mail. Recovery number linked to Linda Carter. On February 3rd, 10:27 a.m., a guarantor packet bearing Evelyn Carter's name and copied signature sample was uploaded to the Halstead House vendor portal. My father lifted a hand. This is speculation. Jordan placed a second document over the first. No, sir. This is the login map. A red line charted the IP connection from Naperville to the hotel portal submission. Another log tied later edits to the real estate office downtown. Dates and times, device IDs, browser signatures, small facts lined up like stones. Miriam continued. On March 12th, Vanessa Carter approved upgrades totaling $10,874. On March 18th, Linda Carter emailed planner Celeste Moreno, quote, Evelyn signed off. She can afford it. Don't include her on every little change or she'll nitpick. On March 22nd, Thomas Carter spoke with hotel accounting and described Evelyn as, quote, our family guarantor. We have that call transcript. My father's face darkened. I want to see the transcript. Jordan slid it to him. His hand shook when he took it. I said nothing. I wanted them to see it all before I spoke. I wanted them to feel the structure of the case closing around them one piece at a time. Miriam looked toward Celeste. Ms. Moreno, would you explain why you contacted my office? Celeste uncrossed and recrossed her ankles before answering. The movement was small, controlled, because when Ms. Carter disputed the guarantee, I reviewed the full communication record. I realized I had been instructed by Mrs. Carter to backdate a document and reuse a signature. I refused. After that, I was told any internal audit issue would be described as my administrative error. My mother turned toward her, so quickly her chair creaked. That is not what I said. Celeste met her eyes. I kept the audio. Jordan pressed play. Again, my mother's voice spilled into the room. Clearer this time through better speakers. Then paste the signature and resend it. This is not complicated. Vanessa shut her eyes. Derek leaned back in his chair like someone had yanked the table away from him. His jaw flexed once. Twice. My father stared at my mother. And there, finally, the fracture line split open. You told me everything was authorized, he said. My mother spun toward him. Do not start that. You were the one who said Evelyn owed us. I said ask her. You said she had the money. Vanessa's head snapped up. Are you both insane? This is not on me. Derek laughed once, without humor. Not on you? Who approved the upgrades? I thought my family had it handled. You told me your sister volunteered. She should have. Vanessa shot back. After everything Mom and Dad did for her. There it was again. The family arithmetic that never used real numbers. Love converted into debt. Parenting treated like an invoice. Every achievement I'd ever had translated into what I now supposedly owed the people who had raised me. Miriam let the crossfire burn for 10 seconds, maybe 12. Then she raised a hand and the room obeyed. One more revelation, she said. Jordan opened the second banker's box and removed a slim folder labeled income letter/distribution records. This, Miriam said, is the salary verification file attached to the guarantor submission. It was not downloaded from Evelyn's employer. It was assembled from two separate sources, an outdated HR letter obtained from a previous apartment application and a distribution statement from the estate of Joan Whitaker. My grandmother's name hit the table like another crack of ice. Vanessa frowned. Grandma's estate. Miriam nodded. Your mother attached trust distribution records to make Evelyn appear more liquid than she was. Those records were private. My father turned so slowly toward my mother it looked painful. You used Joan's documents. She wasn't using them. My voice entered the room, then for the first time in several minutes, quiet enough that everyone leaned in to hear it. You told me Grandma's probate file was safely locked in your desk. My mother's nostrils flared. It was... And then you opened it, I said. The silence that followed was heavier than the earlier ones. Denser. Personal. Fraud had been one thing. Family inheritance records were another. My grandmother, Joan Whitaker, had left me a modest trust distribution after the sale of her Evanston townhouse. Enough for a down payment someday. Enough for options. She had done it quietly because she knew exactly what my parents were like with money and status. This is yours. She told me the week before she died, sitting beneath the yellow lamp in her living room with her cardigan folded neatly over one shoulder. Not theirs. Don't let anyone talk you into calling theft generosity. At the time I thought she was being dramatic. She wasn't. Derek turned toward Vanessa. Did you know they used estate paperwork? Vanessa's answer came too fast. No. Jordan slid another printout forward. A text thread. March 24th, 8:16 p.m. Vanessa. Mom says if we show Evelyn's trust docs, the hotel will stop acting weird about limits. Vanessa! She won't even notice. Vanessa stopped breathing for a second. I watched the realization travel across her face as she recognized her own words on paper. My mother whispered, Jordan, wherever you got that. From Ms. Moreno, Miriam said. It was included in a screenshot accidentally sent to the planner while discussing guest shuttle routes. Celeste didn't move. You forwarded texts about my trust to your wedding planner, I said. Vanessa looked at me like she wanted me to rescue her from her own sentence. It was almost muscle memory by then. Little sister eyes. The old expectation that I would absorb, smooth, contain, protect. I remember being 14 and taking the blame when she keyed a neighbor's Lexus because she cried hard enough to make my mother panic. I remembered covering her first bounced rent check in my 20s because my father said she was fragile right now. I remembered the Christmas she opened the watch Grandma had left me and said, in front of everyone, You know Evelyn doesn't even wear gold, right? Until I gave it to her to stop the room from tightening. There are people who mistake your calm for softness because they have only ever seen it used in service of their comfort. I wanted you to see them, I said, looking at Derek rather than Vanessa. All of them, exactly as they are. No one spoke. Miriam turned one final page on her legal pad. Here are the available outcomes, she said. Option 1, full cooperation. Immediate written admission that Evelyn Carter never authorized the guarantee. Corrective notices to all vendors. Payment of all outstanding wedding obligations by the responsible parties. Reimbursement of Evelyn's legal fees, investigative costs, and the hotel's audit expenses. A signed non-disparagement and no contact agreement for 12 months. She let that settle. Option 2, refusal. In that case, we forward the full file to the Cook County State's Attorney for review of identity theft, fraud, and attempted financial coercion, and we advise the hotel and vendors to pursue civil claims independently. Given that Thomas Carter's company equipment and network appear in the submission trail, collateral exposure may include reputational review affecting licensure, board memberships, and lender relationships. My father's face went gray. My mother whispered, You wouldn't. Miriam's expression didn't change. I already drafted the referral packet. Vanessa's chair scraped as she turned toward Derek. Say something. He stared at the table for a long moment. Then he stood. The room watched him. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than I expected. That made it worse. You told me Evelyn offered to sponsor the upgrades because she believed in us, he said to Vanessa. You told me your parents were covering the overages until bonuses hit. You told me the trust was a family asset you'd all discussed. He swallowed. Which part of that was true? Vanessa opened her mouth. Closed it. He nodded once, almost to himself. Right. Then he turned to Miriam. If you need a statement from me, I'll give one. My mother shot to her feet. Derek, sit down. He looked at her with a kind of exhausted disgust I had only seen once before. In a security video Jordan showed me later when a vendor realized someone had been lifting deposit checks. No, Mrs. Carter, he said. I don't think I will. Vanessa stood too. You're just leaving. I'm leaving the lie, he said. He took off his engagement ring and placed it on the walnut table with a small metallic click. Not dramatic. Not thrown. Set down. Deliberate. Like evidence. For the first time in my life, Vanessa had no audience left to perform for. She sank back into her chair, her shoulders folded inward like damp paper. My father pressed both palms flat on the table and looked at Miriam. If we cooperate, he said, each word pulled through clenched teeth, what exactly are we signing? Jordan distributed the settlement packet. The pages were heavy cream stock, the kind law offices favor because it feels expensive enough to discourage nonsense. Admission of unauthorized use. Financial assumption of all obligations. Retraction language to venue and vendors. Reimbursement terms. No contact clause. Deadline for wire transfer. liquidated damages if breached. It was, in its own way, a masterpiece. My mother flipped through it, her pearl earring catching the downlight. This will destroy us socially. I looked at her then, really looked, at the perfect blowout, the expensive cream coat, the tremor in the fingers she kept trying to still against the paper. No, I said softly. The forgery did that. This just creates a paper trail. She stared at me with naked hatred, and because I was no longer surprised by it, it had no power. My father signed first. The pen scratched across the page in short, furious movements. Thomas Andrew Carter. I watched the man who had spent my entire life teaching me about reputation sign his name beneath an admission that his own network had been used to fabricate my financial consent. My mother lasted 3 minutes longer. She argued 2 clauses, tried to strike the no-contact provision, objected to the reimbursement amount. Miriam rejected each attempt without inflection. Finally, Linda Marie Carter signed too, lips pressed together, so tightly the lipstick whitened at the center. Vanessa was last. Her signature wavered halfway through the second name. The bridal manicure she'd posted on Instagram the day before looked obscene against the legal paper. When it was done, Jordan notarized the packet. Miriam collected each sign set into separate folders. The room exhaled, but the relief belonged only to people with consciences. My mother stood first. "You think this makes you powerful," she said to me. I rose slowly, smoothing the sleeve of my black coat. "No." Vanessa's voice cracked. "You've ruined everything." I met her eyes. "Next time," I said, "make sure the person you frame isn't the one who knows how to build the file." My father flinched. I picked up my bag. Celeste pushed back her chair quietly, ready to leave with Jordan for the hotel follow-up. Derek was already at the door, one hand on the brushed steel handle, looking like a man who had just watched a future evaporate. I paused beside my mother long enough for only her to hear the last line. "You were always so worried about appearances," I said evenly. "You should have cared more about signatures." Then I walked out into the hallway with the soft carpet and the amber sconces and the view of the rain-slicked city below, and I did not look back. 6 months later, my mornings looked nothing like they used to. The first light in my new apartment in Andersonville came in warm across the oak floors and caught the rim of the ceramic coffee mug I always used on weekdays, the dark blue one with the tiny chip near the handle. The windows faced east, and on clear mornings the glass turned pale gold before the rest of the room woke up. My kitchen counter was white quartz, cool under my fingertips. There were basil plants on the sill. No one had a key except me. That matters more than people think. Freedom doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as silence that belongs to you, as a lock nobody else can talk their way through, as coffee brewed strong in a clean machine you bought with your own money, in a space where every object stays exactly where you left it. I stood barefoot at the window with steam warming my face and watched the street below come alive. A woman in a camel coat walked a small black dog past the bakery on the corner. The awning across the block fluttered in the October wind. Somewhere downstairs, somebody laughed. The city sounded ordinary, honest, uninterested in family mythology. My phone buzzed against the counter. Priya Shah from Halstead House. I smiled before I opened it. "You won't believe who I just saw in the lobby of the Palmer region trying to book a charity gala under a maiden name variation." I called her. Priya answered on the first ring, already laughing. She had become an unexpected part of my life after the audit because some people emerge from chaos carrying excellent gossip and better judgment. She was the hotel's senior accounts manager, meticulous, dry, and impossible to intimidate once she decided she disliked you. "Tell me everything," I said. "She tried to book under L. Whitaker Carter," Priya said. "Apparently your mother thinks adding her mother's surname makes her less searchable." I leaned against the counter and took a slow sip of coffee. Did it work? Not once their compliance system cross-referenced vendor disputes. Priya lowered her voice theatrically. She did not enjoy the phrase, enhanced review flag. I closed my eyes for a second and let the satisfaction settle in. That was how the aftermath arrived in my life after the settlement. Not as one clean ending, but as a series of updates. Quiet consequences. Ironies with paperwork attached. Thomas Carter lost his seat on the board of a regional lending advisory committee after Sloan, and Hart's referral threat became unnecessary but the vendor correction notices still circulated exactly where they needed to. No criminal charges were filed because the settlement was airtight and the hotel preferred reimbursement to publicity, but reputational review did what indictments sometimes don't. His commercial lender asked questions. 2 investors withdrew from a development deal in Oak Brook. The man who had spent 3 decades curating an image of iron control became, in certain rooms, the cautionary anecdote. Linda Carter's social fall was more surgical. She wasn't publicly shamed in any grand theatrical way. That would have given her something to survive. No, what happened to my mother was quieter and much more her size. She stopped being invited first. Then she stopped being asked at all. The Hinsdale Charity Luncheon Board replaced her for scheduling reasons. The women who once air-kissed both cheeks at fundraisers became too busy to return messages. A holiday house tour committee that had begged for her decorative input for years suddenly found its theme leaning more contemporary. In communities built on surface, exclusion is performed with velvet gloves. Vanessa, of course, suffered the kind of humiliation she had spent her whole life fearing most, public diminishment without a clear villain to blame. Derek ended the engagement officially 2 weeks after the boardroom meeting. The deposits already paid were a mess, the wedding website disappeared overnight, and the photographer quietly removed their engagement session from her portfolio. Vanessa tried to spin it at first. Mutual decision. Different life timelines. Privacy, please. But vendors talk. Bridesmaids talk more, and one of the lounge rental assistants posted a cryptic reel about clients who think forgery is a budgeting strategy. No names. None needed. In a city built on overlap, stories find their own routing. The enablers got their portions too. My Aunt Carol, who had called me cold for involving attorneys before she knew the facts, phoned me 2 months later after my mother borrowed $5,000 from a family vacation fund Carol managed for her twins. Suddenly boundaries were not cruel anymore. Suddenly documentation was wise. Suddenly I was not overreacting but probably right all along. My cousin Brent, who told me I should have paid the bill just to preserve peace, found out the hard way that my father's version of temporary bridge loan meant unsecured money that vanished into overhead. He stopped reposting inspirational quotes about family loyalty after that. Even the church felt it. Quietly. Properly. My parents were not excommunicated or anything so dramatic, but they were moved off stewardship-related duties during a season of rest and reflection. I heard that phrase through 3 separate people before Thanksgiving. And through all of it, the messages kept coming. At first they arrived in bursts. From Mom, we need to talk like adults. From Dad, your attorney has made this impossible. From Vanessa, I hope you're happy. Then the tone shifted. From Mom, your father isn't sleeping. From Dad, the family is not the same. From Vanessa, at 1:13 a.m., I miss my sister. I archived every one. Some were angry, some nostalgic, some manipulative enough to deserve their own case study. My favorite came from my mother in December, attached to a photo of our old Christmas table set with her red and gold china. No matter what happened, this was still your home. I looked at that message for a full minute before moving it into the evidence archive with the rest. Not because it tempted me, because it reminded me how deeply some people confuse access with love. The life that opened after all of this was not the one I had expected, but it was unmistakably mine. 3 months after the settlement, Miriam invited me to coffee at a place on Clark Street with matte black tile, brass pendant lights, and pastries arranged behind curved glass like jewelry. She slid a folder across the table between us. I have a question, she said. Inside was a proposal from a boutique consultancy that advised hospitality groups and mid-sized businesses on identity misuse, billing controls, vendor verification, and internal fraud prevention. Miriam represented 2 of their clients. They needed someone who understood the mechanics and the psychology. Someone who could read a messy human story inside a clean PDF trail. You want me to consult, I said. I want you to build the division, she replied. That was the beginning. By spring, I had left my old software compliance role and launched Carter verification strategies with 2 anchor clients, 1 shared assistant, and a River North office suite with exposed brick, steel-framed glass partitions, and exactly 1 plant I kept forgetting to water until Celeste started doing it when she visited. Yes, Celeste. Because some alliances don't just survive chaos. They are born from it. After the boardroom meeting, Halstead House hired her as senior event risk coordinator rather than losing her to another firm, and part of that role meant designing better approval protocols. She called me one afternoon about revising guarantor verification language. That turned into lunch. Lunch turned into a standing Thursday coffee. Somewhere between the second and fifth meeting, friendship arrived without asking permission. "You know what your mother was most offended by?" she asked me once over cortados on a rainy Thursday, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. "That she got caught." "No," Celeste said. "That the documents mattered more than her certainty." She wasn't wrong. I also kept Priya in my life, partly because every competent woman deserves an appreciative audience, and partly because she had the kind of observational precision I trusted instinctively. On bad days, we met at a little Gujarati cafe near Devon Avenue where the stainless steel teapots arrived too hot to touch and the cardamom clung to the air. One afternoon, while sunlight flashed off the laminated tabletop and traffic hummed outside the plate glass window, Priya leaned in and said, "Have you heard? David's been consulting for your father." I frowned. "David Kessler?" "The same. And by consulting, I mean trying to untangle cash flow after 2 projects got delayed when investors asked more questions than expected." I stirred my tea once. "That must be stressful." Priya laughed into her cup. "You say that like a woman describing weather from indoors." Maybe that was exactly what it felt like by then. Their storms no longer required my umbrella. There were other updates, too. Vanessa tried launching a lifestyle brand about starting over with Grace, and quietly disabled comments after someone asked whether Grace included forged financial instruments. My mother sold the pearl drop earrings she wore to every winter gala. I know this because Aunt Carol sent me a screenshot from a consignment account and captioned it with, "Thought you'd appreciate the symbolism." My father's name disappeared from the donor wall at a local arts initiative after a restructuring of recognition tiers. Small cuts. Precise ones. None of it made me giddy. That's the part people who have never lived through betrayal misunderstand. Real justice doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like oxygen returning to a room you didn't realize had gone thin. The better part was my own life. I slept. I ate dinner without checking my phone. I stopped bracing every time it vibrated. I learned the names of my neighbors. Bought a cashmere throw I didn't need just because it felt soft, and no one could guilt me about the price. Painted the bedroom a muted green that reminded me of lake water. Took Sunday walks by the harbor. Opened a savings account labeled Barcelona because I had always wanted to go somewhere beautiful without explaining myself to anyone. And I did not do it alone. The warmest surprise of the entire ordeal came from an angle I never would have predicted. In the early weeks after the settlement, Derek Hall emailed me once. A short message. "No drama. You were right. About all of it. If you're willing, I'd like to return something that belongs to you." We met at a quiet restaurant in Lincoln Park with amber pendant lights, darkwood booths, and linen napkins folded into sharp triangles. He slid a small velvet box across the table. Inside was my grandmother Joan's gold watch. Vanessa had apparently stored it in a dresser tray at the condo she briefly shared with him while pretending their wedding was merely postponed. "I thought you should have it," Derek said. I looked at the watch resting in the velvet, at the small scratches near the clasp I remembered from childhood, and then at the man across from me who looked older now than he had 6 months earlier. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once. "I should have seen more." "Yes," I replied. There was no cruelty in it, just truth. Oddly enough, that dinner became the first of several. Not romantic. Never that. Just 2 people who had survived the same family blast radius from different angles. Derek had his own humiliations to untangle, his own trust to rebuild. He turned out to be better company without a Carter woman narrating his reactions for him. Wry. Thoughtful. A little too fond of expensive bourbon and historical documentaries. The sort of man who needed his life to collapse once before he learned how much of it had been outsourced to somebody else's performance. By late summer, he and Celeste and Priya had become part of a strange, sturdy little circle that formed around me after the fallout. People who understood the story without requiring me to reenact it. People who never said, but their family, as if that erased evidence. That evening in early October, the sky over the city turned the color of ripe apricots and copper pennies. Sunset stretched itself across the glass towers downtown until the windows held fire for a few minutes before surrendering to blue. I stood on my balcony with a gold watch on my wrist, a weighted blanket around my shoulders, and a low tumbler of sparkling water in my hand while the first city lights blinked on below like quiet answers. Celeste arrived 10 minutes later with a paper bag from the bakery downstairs, and Derek 2 minutes after that carrying a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling rose because Priya was driving in from a late audit and refused to miss what she had declared our petty little harvest celebration. The balcony table was small, black metal, still warm from the last of the sun. The railing smelled faintly of rain-dried iron. Priya stepped out onto the balcony last, loosened her scarf, and held up her phone. "Before anyone sits down," she said. "You should know Vanessa just updated her LinkedIn headline from brand curator to resilience mentor." Celeste nearly choked laughing. Derek leaned against the railing and closed his eyes. "That is deeply on brand." I laughed too, a real laugh, the kind that begins in the ribs. The city glowed around us in amber and indigo. Somewhere below, dishes clinked from the restaurant patio. Wind lifted the corner of a paper pastry sleeve and set it back down. It struck me then how strange life can be in the gentlest possible way. Here I was, sharing dessert on a balcony with a hotel accounts manager, a wedding planner my mother once tried to scapegoat, and the man who had nearly become my brother-in-law. People who had once occupied the opposite side of an ugly story now sat in the warm spill of my string lights, passing napkins and making room for one another's elbows. If you had told the old version of me that this would be the shape of peace, she might not have believed you. Because the old me still thought safety meant keeping difficult people calm. She thought love meant absorbing damage before it reached the table. She thought maturity meant being the reasonable one while everyone else enjoyed the luxury of behaving badly. She mistook endurance for virtue and silence for grace. The woman I became learned something better. Boundaries are not cruelty. Documentation is not disloyalty. And composure, in the right hands, is not submission. It is architecture. Priya poured the sparkling rose into stemless glasses. The liquid caught the last orange light and flashed pale coral. Derek raised his glass first, smiling faintly. "To clean records," he said. Celeste lifted hers. "To verified signatures." Priya tilted hers toward me. "To women who archive everything." I touched my glass lightly to theirs. "To peace that doesn't require pretending." The sound was small and bright against the evening air. For a while we just stood there, eating almond cake out of paper boxes and watching the city slip from sunset into night. Warm windows lit one by one across the street. A siren passed somewhere far off. The sky deepened from copper to plum. I thought about my grandmother then, about the way she used to wind her gold watch before dinner, her fingers slow and certain, as if time was something best handled with respect rather than fear. I thought about the version of me who once sat at my parents' table rehearsing apologies for things she hadn't done. I thought about the woman standing here now, in her own home, among chosen company, with her own work and her own name fully intact. And silently, with more honesty than sentiment, I thanked my parents. Not for what they did, for what it forced me to become. They had meant to use my reliability as a weapon against me. Instead, they sharpened it into a craft. They meant to teach me that peace belonged to whoever controlled the story loudest. Instead, they taught me that truth, when patiently assembled, has a weight performance can't lift. They meant to reduce me to a signature on a bill. Instead, they returned me to myself. The city was almost fully dark by then, but the horizon still held one band of orange like the last line of a promise. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders and looked at the people beside me, at the watch on my wrist, at the life I had built from the wreckage they handed me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making people suffer. It's about becoming so grounded in the truth that their lies can no longer reach you. And if I've learned anything worth keeping, it's this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making them pay. It's building a life so honest, so steady, and so undeniably yours that the only thing left for them to face is themselves.